All right, guys, you either love them or you hate them. Today, we're going to talk about HOA restrictions.
You better get fired up.
Man, that opening gets me fired up every single time. So today I want to talk about HOA restrictions, right? And I'm going to talk about what I came up with a list of probably the 10 most common restrictions. Why do I share these? I share these because I personally, my opinion is I love HOAs, right? I'm busy selling houses, marketing, showing houses, listing houses, making calls. I'm doing a million things with my business that I love. I don't really care to mow my lawn. And I don't really care if I got to pay more money to have an HOA do it. I'd love to do it. I don't really care to go out and figure out who the best internet provider is, or where am I going to get my cable TV that I never watch, or who's going to take care of my landscaping or my pest control. I don't care. I want somebody else to do that, and I'll gladly pay a monthly fee for it. I also want to make sure that when I come home every day, my whole neighborhood is held to a minimum standard, right? It's beautiful. The landscaping's beautiful. Nobody's got a brown or yellow yard. There's no rusted out pickups sitting out front. So for me, I love HOAs. I love the restrictions. And for the few that I don't, I'm willing to, swallow my well, it wouldn't be swallow my pride. I'm willing to overlook it because I want everything looking sharp. Some people are the opposite. And I get these clients all the time. Well, they will say, I don't care where we look, but do not look in an HOA. I hate HOAs. I had a bad experience with an HOA. Let's not do HOAs. Got it. If you have a boat that you want to store in your yard, probably not going to want to be in an HOA, right? If you've got a commercial truck with a big logo on the side, probably going to have a tough time finding an HOA that allows that. So what I'm going to talk about today are the 10 most common HOA restrictions that I hear about. I'm not saying these are the most common in different communities, but they're the 10 most common that, excuse me, tend to be deal breakers, right? So I want to bring them up because if you know about these, then you can ask about them if they would be deal breakers before you sign that contract on that house. Number one, and I already brought this up, right? A lot of your HOAs are not going to allow commercial vehicles, trucks, or trailers. Now, I would say trucks are allowed in a lot of HOAs, but some HOAs just will not allow trucks, period. Doesn't matter how big it is, how small it is. If it's commercial, not commercial color, it doesn't matter. If it's a truck, get it out, right? Trailers, a lot of HOAs will not allow trailers. Now, if it's a vendor coming with their trailer because they got, lawnmowers and it's the landscapers, great. But if it's not that, get it out of here. And with commercial vehicles, a lot of times the discriminating factor there is, does it have some sort of logo or sticker or something like that that shows that it's obviously for a specific business? If so, it's a commercial vehicle. If not, then a lot of times you'll get away with it. But again, if you want to know what it is that defines it as a commercial vehicle, you've got to look in the declarations, the restrictions, the covenants, the rules, all those different things. And it's hundreds of pages, right? So you want to take your time and look through all that stuff before you make your decision, if that's a big deal to you. Number two, a lot of these areas will not allow parking in the streets or over the sidewalks. Now, the sidewalks is actually a Florida statute, right? You can't park over sidewalks. And the reason is you've got elderly, you've got young kids, you've got people in wheelchairs, whatever it is, who need that sidewalk so that they're not unsafely, with a lack of safety, walking in the middle of the streets, right? So you can't block it. However, when you're in a private HOA that has private roads, a lot of times those HOAs are going to add into their rules, hey, you can't park on the sidewalks. Additionally, a lot of them will say you cannot park in the streets, or maybe you can park on the east side of the street, but not the west side, or it's the east side of the street for month one and the west side for month two, or whatever it is, right? But make sure you know, not just for you, but for the people visiting you, so that you don't get your car towed or incur fines or whatever it is, right? If it's important to you to have more parking space than your driveway and your garage allow, you're absolutely going to want to look into the parking restrictions that community has before you sign on the dotted line. Number three, No pets or restricted pets, right? So most communities have some sort of pet restriction. Some of them won't allow pets at all. Most of them do, especially if it's mostly single family homes. But a lot of times they'll have restrictions on breeds, right? They don't want to see pit bulls, Doberman pinchers. Sometimes they'll say German shepherds. It's whatever that particular HOA decides, but they're looking at what most people would consider more dangerous dogs. Doesn't matter what you think is dangerous or what I think is dangerous. What matters is what is in the documents of that particular HOA, right? Some of them will have size limitations. So maybe you can have dogs and it can be whatever you want, but it's got to be up to 35 pounds or whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's a number restriction. So, hey, you can have cats or dogs, but you can only have 2 total. All right, that sounds good. So there are different restrictions in place. If you're a pet lover or you're thinking about getting a pet, you're going to want to make sure you find out what those restrictions are before you sign on the dotted line. Number 4, no subleasing or specific subleasing rules. So in a lot of places, especially if you're on the ocean, we get a lot of people who want to invest on the ocean and they say, Joe, do you have a condo, a townhouse, something like that, that I can purchase and I can sublease it? Well, a lot of those people do not want that particular thing going on. So you'll see a lot of these HOAs that are on the ocean specifically do not allow for subleasing, or in a lot of these communities, if they do allow subleasing, they might tell you need to own the property for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, before you can sublease. So for that first year or two, you've got to actually, well, you don't have to live in the property, but you can't sublease it, right? My assumption there, although I'm making an assumption, is they want you to purchase the property for homestead purposes only, or for personal use as a secondary property only. They don't want leases going on in there very much, but they've had situations where people own the property for 8 years and now they say, I don't want to get rid of the property. I love the property. I'd rather just lease it out. And so they'll say, hey, if you've lived here long enough, which in most cases it's 1, 2, or 3 years, then all right, now you can lease it out, right? You've kind of earned that right to. At least that's their perception. Sometimes they'll say you have to have a 12-month minimum lease or a 6-month minimum lease, or maybe we don't care how long your lease is, but you can only have 2 leases a year, 3 leases a year, 1 lease a year, whatever that is. So you're going to want to find out what that is. But there are, especially if you're an investor, there are going to be restrictions a lot of times on how you can sublease the property. Number 5, landscaping limitations. So I'll tell you, in my HOA, there's a lot that you can do if what you're doing does not take up a third of your yard. If your landscaping project's going to take up a third of your yard or more, it's got to be approved through the ACC. And there's also restrictions on how tall things can be and what types of things you can have and whatever, right? Every HOA is going to be a little bit different. So you're going to have what's called an ACC, and it's an architectural changes committee, right? It's a committee of people who look within your ACC guidelines, and based on the guidelines, they determine if what you are wanting to do can be done or not, right? In my opinion, the better documents are very black and white. This can happen, this can't happen, right? But in some of these situations, it's going to be very gray as to what you can or cannot do, specifically with your landscaping. So anytime you want to do something like that, my recommendation would be bring it through the ACC, get it approved first, so you've got something in writing, and now you can go take care of your project. But again, if you're really big on, hey, I got a green thumb and I want very specific landscaping, I love my yard to look like this or this or this or this, you might want to talk with that ACC or look through the ACC guidelines before you purchase that house. Number 6, this is a big one in my community, right? Townhouse roofs. Who has the responsibility for the roof? And if there's an issue, how does it get repaired? So in some circumstances, there are actually, like, let's say for us, we've got 4 units and 6 unit townhouses, and that's a shared roof, right? You got 4 people or 6 people sharing a roof. Whose responsibility is it to replace it? Whose responsibility is it to inspect it, to maintain it, to take care of repairs that are needed, whatever it is? With us, it's our HOA, right? So if there's a problem, the HOA takes care of it, bada bing, bada boom. What's a challenge with that? Well, if you want to move right now and call your roofer, you can't do that. You've got to let the HOA know. The HOA has to call the person, blah, blah, blah. And is it a little bit slower? If you got good management, it's a little slower. But if you've got less than good management, it might take 2, 3, 4 days and you got a leak going on, right? So you want to have good management who's reaching out if the HOA is taking care of it. And if the HOA is taking care of it, you're probably going to have some level of reserves being taken out to cover things like that. Now, those reserves might cover a portion of your expected repairs and replacements. They might cover the whole thing. You're going to want to look at the financials if you're getting into a shared unit situation to see where they're sitting. Do they have any reserves? What are their typical expenses over a year? Do those reserves account for maybe a month's worth of savings or a year's worth of savings? That'll tell you how strong or financially strong they are as an HOA, right? Now, there are some circumstances, and in our community, this was the situation 3 years ago, where the roofs on a shared roof are actually maintained. The responsibility to maintain them is on the owners. So now you can have the challenge. This is the challenge we had, where owners 1 through 5 have money and they all agree on a certain guy that they want to use and they're ready to go. But guy 6 doesn't agree with using that person, or they don't have the money to fix it. That can be a challenge, right? Because now how are we going to get this thing done if Bob over here isn't paying his bill? Does it happen? Sure. There are people who've been successful with this. There's been people who aren't successful. There's pros and cons to all of it, but the big thing is just know that's something you're going to want to look into before you sign on the dotted line. Number 7, specific approved colors for multiple things. Roofs, right? If you got a shingled roof, you could have a blue roof, a red roof. I don't know if there's yellow, but you got the grays, the blacks, the whites, all the different colors. HOAs are usually going to dictate what color, what style, whatever of shingle you can use. Can you use metal or not? What type of metal? Some will say you can do metal, but you can't have the screws exposed. Can you do tile? What type of tile? What are the colors? All these different things for roofs, right? With your exterior paint, a lot of communities are going to tell you exactly what 7 shades of paint are allowed, and those are your only options, right? So you're going to want to find that out before you paint. I've seen people before who go and paint thinking, hey, I can paint. I've always painted, but they've never lived in an HOA. 3 weeks later, they get a violation letter saying, hey, you got 30 days to paint one of these 7 approved colors, and they're upset. Well, you got to read the documents, right? So really check to see if you are, like for me, I don't really care what the color of my, I mean, I don't want it to be pink or purple, but I don't really care what color my house is. So for me, it's not a big deal. For other people, it's a huge deal. So make sure you understand that before you go in. And then doors, right? For a lot of places, the doors have to match, maybe the exterior color, or they got to be black or white or brown or whatever they got to be. Really doesn't matter. It's just you making sure that you're okay with whatever that is, right? And for a lot of people, they don't necessarily care that much, like I don't, but they will replace their door. And then again, they get the violation letter because it's not one of the approved colors. So just make sure you look into those colors. Number 8, specific fencing material and height. So in my community, you are allowed to do the white vinyl fences that are, 7 feet tall? I don't know how tall they are. They're either 6 or 7 feet. There's other communities that I show that only allow the black metal fences, right? And they've got to be a certain height. I'm guessing they're probably 3-4 feet, something like that. And you can't do a white vinyl fence. So if you specifically have kids or pets, or there's a certain aesthetic you really want, make sure that you ask about that before you purchase in there. You might not be able to do what it is you want, right? And that brings me to the last 2, which are loosely connected here. Pools in your lot, right? In some places, they do not allow pools. So you're going to want to find out if you can do a pool. In some places, even if you can do a pool, you might not have a big enough lot to get a pool, or at least the pool size that you want. So really looking into all that. If pool is a big deal to you, look into that before you commit to purchasing the home, right? And then lastly is guests in the community pool or shared areas. So I can tell you in our community, you can go there with your entire family, whoever was on your application to purchase your home. So for me, it's me, my wife, and my 2 kids. There's 4 of us. Us 4 can show up, your family can show up, and you can bring up to 6 guests. Not a problem. If you bring 7 guests, it's a problem, right? And there's obviously reasons why we do that. And there's pros and cons to it. And some people are going to get upset with one. And if you take it away, others are going to get upset because it's too crowded. It is what it is. At the end of the day, it's an HOA. You either like the rules or you don't like the rules. If you don't like the rules, don't sign the paperwork. If you do like the rules, go ahead and sign. Now, if you sign the paperwork and there's a rule you don't like, but you're like, I'm going to buy it anyway, but you still want that rule changed, you can go to your HOA board meeting. You can meet with your board. They meet monthly, most do. And you can say to them, hey, this particular rule I don't think should be in place. I think we should have this rule in place. And they'll consider it and they might make a change. Now, there's a bunch of different rules around how to change rules, whether they're covenants or declarations or restrictions or rules. But they'll walk you through all that. They'll tell you their options. They'll take a vote. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. and maybe they'll make a decision to change to whatever it is you're doing. I'm on my board, and I'll tell you, we make decisions all the time that had nothing to do with us coming up with this idea. It was a resident who brought up an idea, and we considered it as a board, and the majority of us agreed. We took a vote, and boom, we implemented a rule. So it happens all the time if you've got a good open-minded board who's willing to listen. So absolutely, you can affect change. But again, if it's something so bothersome that you would not want to live in that community unless it was changed, my recommendation is do not bank on the board making that change. Instead, don't purchase the house in that area, right? So there you go, guys. There are the 10 most common brought up, I would say, deal breakers when it comes to HOAs and their restrictions. Again, you're probably either loving an HOA and you will not ever live outside of an HOA, or you despise HOAs and you want nothing to do with them. Both are completely fine, but if you're going to get into an HOA, just make sure you read the doggone paperwork. Guys, I appreciate you joining me. If you've got ideas for future videos that you'd like me to do, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm more than happy to do them. And thank you again for joining me. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Take care.